contact. And 3-3, you're clear for contact.
3-3.
Imagine standing on a dark runway at Edwards Air Force Base. The desert is silent. Then, somewhere in the blackness, 4 engines begin to howl. Not scream, howl. A deep, metallic, chest-shaking roar that sounds less like an aircraft starting up, and more like a sleeping predator, waking up angry. A crew chief raises one hand. A pilot inside the cockpit checks the instruments one last time, and under the belly of the aircraft, hanging from a place most people forgot even existed, is a new weapons mount designed to carry the kind of missiles that could change the balance of power in the Pacific. This is not the B-21 Raider. It is not a secret 6th-generation aircraft. It is not a futuristic bomber rolled out of a classified hangar. It is the B-1B Lancer, a Cold War bomber that entered service in the 1980s, fought for decades, was beaten down by maintenance problems, and was supposed to be slowly retired. But here is the part that changes everything. For most of its modern life, the B-1B's external weapon stations were not part of its normal conventional combat identity. They were locked away by history, shaped by arms control decisions, and left unused while the aircraft carried its weapons internally. Locked, unused, almost forgotten. And now, in 2026, engineers are bringing that hidden capacity back. That means an aircraft many people saw as old, tired, and temporary may become something far more dangerous. A fast, heavy, long-range missile truck. That can launch standoff weapons from outside the enemy's most lethal defensive zones. America may not have built a new bomber for this specific job. It may have resurrected an old one, and by the end of this video, you will understand why reactivating those external hardpoints may be one of the most important bomber decisions of this decade. Because the most dangerous thing about the B-1B right now is not what it is what it is about to become. Before we talk about pylons, hypersonic missiles, anti-ship weapons, and great power competition, picture 2 people. The first is inside the cockpit. Let's call him Captain Mason Reed. He is not a superhero. He is not flying a glossy science fiction aircraft. He is sitting inside a bomber that has been touched by thousands of maintainers, flown by generations of crews, and shaped by nearly half a century of American air power doctrine. The second person is outside, on the ground in the cold. Let's call her Senior Airman Torres. She is a weapons loader. She will never fire the missile herself. She will never be in the cockpit when the bomber crosses the ocean. But without her, Reed cannot fly a single combat mission. Every upgrade, every new pylon, every additional weapon that gets mounted under this aircraft starts with people like Torres standing on a ladder in the dark, reading procedures that may not have existed a few years ago. That is what makes this story different. This is not just about an aircraft becoming more powerful. It is about a crew being asked to turn an old machine into a new answer for a new kind of war. Because the United States has a problem. The B-21 Raider is coming, but it will not appear in large numbers overnight. The B-52 is being modernized, but it is already carrying a heavy modernization burden. The B-2 is stealthy but limited and expensive, and the world is not waiting politely for America's perfect future bomber fleet to arrive. China is expanding its navy. Russia has shown how fast modern war burns through precision weapons. Iran, North Korea, and other regional threats continue to harden targets and build layered defenses, so the Air Force needs more long-range strike capacity now. Not in 10 years, not when every B-21 is ready, now, and that is why the B-1B Lancer has walked back into the room. The B-1B is often called the Bone. The nickname comes from B-1, B-O-N-E, but it fits the aircraft almost too well. Because the B-1B really is the skeleton of America's Cold War bomber ambition. The original idea was extreme. Build an aircraft with the range and payload of a heavy bomber, but with the speed and low-altitude penetration ability of a supersonic attacker. The B-1A was the faster version. Then came the B-1B, changed for a different reality. It traded some top speed for lower radar signature. improved conventional payload capacity, and a mission that would evolve far beyond what its designers originally expected. During the Cold War, the B-1 was part of America's strategic nuclear logic. But after arms control agreements and the removal of its nuclear role, the B-1B became a conventional bomber. And here is the detail that matters for this story. Some of the aircraft's external carriage potential, especially the hardpoints connected to earlier cruise missile concepts, became a ghost of the original design. They were there, but not used in the way this new upgrade imagines. That is the buried twist of the B-1B story. The aircraft was not simply old. It was underused in a very specific way. For decades, the bone became a conventional monster. It could carry massive internal payloads. It could support troops on the ground. It could loiter, respond, and deliver precision weapons with terrifying speed. Special operations forces in Afghanistan understood this very well. When a B-1B was overhead, it meant heavy, precise firepower could arrive quickly when things went bad. But years of hard flying also damaged the fleet. Long missions, desert conditions, maintenance demands, aging airframes. Some aircraft spent far too much time on the ground. Some were retired early, and the plan seemed obvious. Keep the surviving B-1Bs alive until the B-21 could replace them. Then engineers asked a better question. What if the bone was not just something to keep alive? What if it could be made more dangerous? If you enjoy military aviation stories where old machines return with a new and dangerous purpose, subscribe to AeropediaTV now, because this channel is not just about aircraft names and numbers. It is about the strategy behind the machine, the people behind the mission, and the moment when one engineering decision changes the balance of power across an ocean. Now let's go under the fuselage, because that is where this story becomes serious. The key to the B-1B's new future is not hidden in the cockpit. It is under the aircraft. The B-1B has external hardpoints. These are not decorative. They are not random pieces of metal. They are part of the aircraft's original design logic, the kind of structural capacity that once made sense for a different strategic era. For years, those hardpoints were not the center of the aircraft's conventional mission, but the physical possibility remained. Boeing's LOAD, adaptable modular pylon, often called the LAM pylon, is designed to turn that old structural possibility into a new weapons pathway. But do not think of this as simply bolting a rack under a bomber. That is the cartoon version. The real version is an engineering nightmare. A modern pylon has to handle weight, airflow, vibration, emergency conditions, electrical connections, data transfer, weapon release timing, and flight safety. It must work at different speeds, different altitudes, and different configurations. It must not damage the aircraft. It must not destabilize the bomber. It must not release the weapon in a way that endangers the crew. So when people say, just hang more missiles on it, they are missing the real challenge. Can the aircraft carry the weapon safely? Can the weapon talk to the bomber? Can the crew manage it? Can the release profile be modeled? Can the center of gravity stay within limits? Can Torres and her team load it repeatedly in real operational conditions? That is why this upgrade matters. It is not just a pylon, it is a doorway to more JASSM-type standoff missiles, more LRASM anti-ship weapons, more test options for large future weapons, and potentially more flexibility for hypersonic systems that do not fit cleanly into yesterday's bomber assumptions. That is why a B-1B flying with new external carriage is not just an interesting test photo, it is a warning shot. Here is the simplest way to understand the upgraded B-1B. A stealth bomber is a burglar. It sneaks into the most dangerous airspace and opens the door from the inside. A missile truck is different. It does not need to sneak into the room. It parks far away and throws the entire toolbox through the window. That is what the B-1B can become. It is not trying to be the B-21. It is not trying to be invisible. It is trying to carry mass, speed, and range into the launch zone, then unleash weapons from a distance. In a conflict across the Pacific, that matters enormously, because the Pacific is not just a map. It is a weapon. Distances are enormous. Bases are far apart. Ships move. Air defenses overlap. Tankers become critical. Every mile matters. A bomber that can carry a heavy internal load and then add external standoff weapons gives commanders something extremely valuable: salvo mass. And salvo mass is not just about destruction. It is about mathematics. Air defense is not magic. It is arithmetic under stress. How many incoming missiles? From what direction? At what altitude? At what speed? How many interceptors are available? How many radar tracks are real? How many are decoys? How fast can commanders decide? What happens if the second wave is already coming? One missile is a punch. A salvo is a collapsing ceiling. And the upgraded B-1B is dangerous because it attacks the enemy's defensive math. It says, you may be able to stop one weapon, but can you stop the whole storm? Here is the twist. The B-1B does not need to be invisible to be terrifying. In fact, that may be the entire point. Stealth aircraft are precious. They are limited. They are built for the most dangerous missions. But if the United States needs to generate mass fires from a distance, it needs aircraft that can carry more weapons, launch from outside the worst threat rings, and do it before the future bomber fleet exists in large numbers. That is what turns the bone from a relic into a problem. Not a perfect problem, not an invincible problem, but a problem any rival planner has to respect. Because if a B-1B can stand outside the most dangerous defensive zone and launch a heavy salvo of long-range weapons, then the enemy does not just have to defend the target. They have to defend the math. Now move the story from land to sea. One of the most important weapons in this conversation is the LRASM, the long-range anti-ship missile. And the reason LRASM matters is simple. Ships move. They do not sit on a runway. They hide inside groups. They use radars, jammers, decoys, escorts, and layered defenses. Sinking a modern warship is not like bombing a warehouse. You have to find it, identify it, track it, survive the defensive screen, and hit the right target. LRASM was designed for that kind of problem. Its exact capabilities are sensitive, but it is widely understood as a standoff anti-ship weapon, with a range often described in the more than 200 nautical mile class. For a bomber, that range changes the geometry of a naval fight. A B-1B does not have to fly directly into the heart of every enemy missile battery. It can bring multiple anti-ship weapons into a launch area, fire from a distance, and let the missiles create the next problem for the enemy fleet. Now, imagine that in the Indo-Pacific, a surface group is moving. Radars are scanning. Commanders are trying to protect carriers, destroyers, logistics ships, and amphibious forces. Then multiple long-range weapons arrive from different angles, forcing every ship to make decisions fast. Track it, jam it, intercept it, ignore it, and risk impact. That is why the B-1B matters in maritime strategy. Not because it is the newest bomber, not because it is stealthier than the B-21, but because war at sea is a game of distance, timing, and salvo size. And the bone can bring a lot of salvo. Now we reach the word everyone uses, and very few people explain clearly. Hypersonic. A hypersonic weapon travels at Mach 5 or faster, at least 5 times the speed of sound. But speed alone is not the whole story. The real danger is time compression. A slower weapon gives defenders more time to detect, track, classify, decide, and respond. A hypersonic weapon squeezes that window. It forces commanders to make life or death decisions faster. It may maneuver. It may fly unusual paths. It may reach time-sensitive targets before the enemy can relocate or properly react. That is why the B-1B is so interesting as a future hypersonic test and carriage platform. The aircraft itself does not need to be hypersonic. The bomber becomes the archer. The weapon becomes the arrow. The archer does not have to run at the speed of the arrow. He only has to get close enough to shoot. Now imagine that archer, carrying not one arrow, but a heavy quiver of weapons designed to move faster than most defenders have trained to stop. That is the nightmare scenario for rival planners. Not because every dramatic number online should be treated as guaranteed. It should not. Not because every B-1B will always fly with the maximum theoretical load. It will not. But because the direction is clear. The B-1B is being positioned as a bridge between today's bomber fleet and tomorrow's strike weapons. A test bed, a carrier, a salvo generator, a way to accelerate experimentation while the B-21 ramps up and the B-52 carries its own modernization burden. And in military competition, timing matters. A capability delivered too late may be irrelevant. A capability adapted now can change planning immediately. Now, before the hype runs away with the story, we have to say something important. This is not magic. The B-1B is not suddenly a stealth bomber. It is not immune to air defenses. It is not cheap to maintain. It has had real readiness challenges. It is an aging aircraft with all the problems aging aircraft bring. External weapons also create trade-offs. More weapons can mean more drag. More drag can affect range. More weight changes mission planning. More complexity means more maintenance. More integration means more testing. And maximum theoretical loadouts are not the same thing as normal combat loadouts. Military YouTube loves big numbers. 36 missiles, 31 hypersonics. One bomber changes everything. Those numbers may describe possible configurations or future test logic, but real air warfare is more complicated. The actual load depends on the mission, target, runway, tanker support, threat level, weapon availability, rules of engagement, and how much risk commanders are willing to accept. So the true story is not that every B-1B will always fly with some maximum fantasy load. The true story is better. Commanders may soon have more options. A smaller precision package, a heavy anti-ship configuration, a mixed standoff load, a future hypersonic test profile, a maritime strike mission, a suppression mission, a long-range conventional strike package. Options are power, and the B-1B upgrade gives America something extremely useful. Not a perfect bomber, but a more flexible one. Now return to Senior Airman Torres, because this upgrade will not be decided only by generals, pilots, or defense analysts. It will be decided on the ground. Picture Torres on the ramp before sunrise. The bomber is enormous above her. The ladder shifts slightly in the wind. Her gloves are stiff from the cold. A flashlight cuts across the underside of the aircraft. The mission clock is already moving. This is not a familiar bomb load she has done 100 times. This is a new pylon, different connectors, different inspection points, different weight distribution, different safety steps, different release logic, different consequences if something goes wrong. The internet sees a number. More missiles. Torres sees a checklist. A missing pin. A connector that does not seat correctly. A panel that needs rechecking. A weapon that must talk to the aircraft before it can ever be released in anger. The pilot may get the cinematic shot. The missile may get the headline. But the mission begins with the people who make the aircraft safe enough to fly. Every success in the air begins with 1,000 invisible victories on the ground. And that is why this B-1B upgrade is not just an engineering story. It is a human story. It is Reed trusting an old bomber to cross an ocean. It is Torres trusting that every procedure, every torque value, every inspection, and every connection has been done right. It is test pilots, engineers, crew chiefs, weapons loaders, software teams, and maintainers all trying to answer the same question. Can we turn a bomber built for one era into a weapon that matters in the next? That is the invisible war behind the missile truck. And without it, the entire strategy stays on paper. Here is the strategic picture. In one sentence, China has spent decades building a wall around the Western Pacific. Long-range missiles, advanced air defenses, a growing navy, radar, sensors, artificial islands, and weapons designed to keep American power at distance. The entire architecture is built around one goal: make it dangerous for U.S. forces to move close enough to fight. The B-21 Raider is designed for part of that problem. It will be the future penetrating bomber, the aircraft meant to enter places older bombers cannot safely go. But the B-21 will not appear in massive numbers overnight, and China is not waiting. That is where the B-1B matters. The bone does something the B-21 cannot do in large numbers right now. It exists. It is operational. It is fast, it has range, it has cruise bases, procedures, and a history of conventional strike. And with external pylons carrying long-range standoff weapons, it can contribute to the fight without acting like a stealth bomber. That is not a consolation prize. That is a different weapon, for a different part of the problem. The B-21 is the key that opens the most defended doors. The B-1B is the freight train that arrives while those doors are still being unlocked. In a networked war, the B-1B is not alone. It can receive targeting from other platforms. It can be part of a kill web involving satellites, submarines, fighters, tankers, drones, and allied bases. Its job is not to do everything. Its job is to add mass at the moment mass matters most, and that makes it dangerous, not because it is the future forever, but because it may be the bridge America needs before the future arrives. Military history is full of weapons that were supposed to be obsolete, until someone found a new way to use them. The B-1B does not have to be young. It has to be useful. It does not have to replace the B-21. It has to buy time for the B-21. It does not have to defeat every enemy air defense by itself. It has to make the enemy's defense problem harder, faster, and more expensive. That is the quiet genius of this upgrade. It does not pretend the bone is perfect. It accepts the aircraft's age, its maintenance burden, its limitations, and then asks what it can still do, better than almost anything else. Carry weight, move fast, launch from range, create salvo mass, attack the enemy's defensive math. The B-21 may be the future king, but the B-1B may be the old knight still holding the gate. Return now to that runway at Edwards. Captain Mason Reed pushes the throttles forward. The engines rise from a growl to a roar. Torres stands clear, watching the aircraft move under its own power, knowing that everything under that wing and belly passed through human hands before it ever became a strategic concept on a map. At first, the B-1B looks too large to move so quickly. Then the wings bite into the air, the landing gear lifts, and the old bomber climbs into the desert sky carrying something it had almost lost: relevance. That is what this upgrade really is. Not just a pylon, not just a missile rack, not just an engineering program. A new possibility. The possibility that an old bomber can help solve a modern missile problem. The possibility that America can add long-range firepower faster than it can build brand new aircraft. The possibility that the B-1B's final chapter may be more dangerous than its first. The bone was designed for one era, adapted for another, worn down by war, prepared for retirement, and then pulled back into relevance by people who saw unused potential under the fuselage. It was supposed to fade out. Instead, it may be getting its sharpest teeth yet. But here is the question that keeps defense planners awake. If the United States is building a kill web where the B-1B carries the missiles, the F-35 finds targets, satellites track movement, submarines threaten sea lanes, and tankers keep the force alive across the Pacific, then what does China build to hunt the hunter? How do you stop a missile truck before it reaches the launch zone? The answer is not one single weapon. It is a system. Sensors, long-range missiles, fighters, electronic warfare, satellites, and command networks designed to find the archer before he releases the arrow. And that story may be even more important than the B-1B itself. We are covering that next. So if you want more stories where military aviation, strategy, engineering, and human courage come together, subscribe to AeropediaTV, because the most important aircraft stories are not always about the newest machines. Sometimes they are about the old ones that refuse to die. The bone is old, the bone is tired, but with new weapons under its belly, the bone may still be one of the most dangerous things in the sky.